What's up guys, Boost Auto here. Today we're going to be showing you how to install a set of Ion Series illuminated door handles. This procedure is going to cover 2019 and newer model Ram 25 and 3500 trucks. With that said, let's get into it. Introducing our new Ion Series light-up door handles by Boost Auto. Our door handles are direct OEM replacements, but we've turned the styling up to 11, with all the same lighting functions as our other Boost Auto products jam-packed into a factory-style door handle. Plus, the Ion Series handles can be built to have white or amber running light to fit right in with any build. A couple of things to note before we get into the install. First, the procedure outlined in this video is for 2019 and newer model Ram 2500 and 3500 trucks. If your vehicle is a different year range, head on over to boostauto.com for the latest in fitment and availability and to purchase all we have to offer. Let's get into it. Starting at the driver's side front door, remove this upper trim panel. If your upper trim panel has a speaker, disconnect the electrical connector and trim clip. For the window switch panel, pry it up and out with a trim tool. Then disconnect the electrical connectors. Now we're going to remove the little trim panel behind the door latch. There's a Phillips head screw behind there we'll remove. Now we're going to remove the whole bezel here. Disconnect any electrical connectors on the back side. Now we will remove the 6T20 Torx bolts around the door panel. Use a flathead screwdriver to separate the bolt from the plastic clip while removing the bolts. Now pop the plastic clips out. Now we can remove the panel from the door. You're going to lift up, make sure you clear the lock rod, and then you can pull it out. Disconnect any electrical connectors on the back side of the door panel. With our panel removed, now we're going to proceed with removing the speaker, which is 4 5mm bolts. Unclip the electrical connector on the speaker. Now we're going to peel back this little access panel. Now, reinstall the window switch so we can move the position of the window. With the window switch connected, we are going to flip the ignition to accessory and roll our window down slowly until we reveal these glass attachment clips. There will be 2 plastic clips, one on the outside of the window track and one in this relief hole in the window track. We will depress these clips later when we remove the window. Make sure your window is in a position where you can access them. This is what the glass attachment clips will look like through the speaker hole. Now at the driver's rear door panel, remove the upper trim panel using a trim tool. Remove the rest of the rear door panel in the same manner we did the front. Remove the speaker. Remove the electrical connector. To access the glass attachment clips, we will have to cut back the top and both sides of the indented access panel with a razor blade. Now fold back the panel so we can access the window track. Reinstall the window switch temporarily. Now put the ignition to accessory and roll the window down slowly until we reveal those clips like we did on the front. We're going to go ahead and repeat all the same steps up until this point on the passenger side. We will now move the front seats forward to enable better access to some trim pieces we need to remove later on. Disconnect the negative terminal on your primary battery as well as your auxiliary battery if you have one. Starting at the left-hand front door, we will begin to remove the window from the track. Pull up on the window while depressing the plastic clips as shown. Do this on both the outside and inside track of the window. Guide the window all the way up. Now with your window all the way up, go ahead and tape it to the frame. First we can take our window switch and remove that again. Disconnect the 2 plastic clips securing the mirror harness to the carrier plate. Now we're going to disconnect the mirror harness from the door module. If you have this connector on the mirror harness, disconnect it as well. If you have passive entry, disconnect the harness and remove it from this indent. To start removing the boot, we will first remove these 2 T20 Torx bolts. Then remove these 2 clips holding in the weather stripping. We can go ahead and release this side of the boot. So there's going to be 4 clips, 2 on the top, 1 about here, 1 further back, as well as 2 on the bottom. So we're going to take a flat blade and start releasing those clips. Once those clips are released, you can start working the connector out. If you need to, you can kind of partially close the door, and that helps it fully release all the way. And then we can get to disconnecting the electrical connectors on the back side.
If you have it, release this middle connector by pressing down on the tab and then pulling it free.
Now we can guide the whole boot and connector back through this weather stripping.
We now have to disengage the handle rod and lock cylinder rod to be able to remove the carrier plate. Unclip the plastic collars from the rods, then pull the rods free. Next, we will remove these 3 T30 Torx bolts on the outer edge of the door around the latch. Now we can remove the 12 10mm bolts around the carrier plate. Release the retaining clip on the top of the carrier plate. Pivot the carrier plate out of the door, being conscious of the latch assembly. If you have passive entry, guide the unplugged end of the harness back through the carrier plate. To remove the door handle, we will have to remove these 3 8mm bolts on the backside. If you have passive entry, you will also have to disconnect this connector here. Pull out on the handle slightly and then maneuver the handle away from the door, being conscious of the electrical connector and the lock and latch rods. Now with the handle removed, first take the lock cylinder and lock rod out. Unclip the plastic collar from the rod, then pull the rod free. Lastly, peel the gasket off the old handle to transfer to our new Ion Series handle. On our new Ion Series handle, feed the electrical connectors through the gasket and install the gasket onto the new handle. Now take the lock cylinder and rod and transfer it into the new handle. This step only applies to the driver's side front handle. All 3 other handles will only have the latch rod that needs to be transferred. Feed the latch rod into the plastic retainer and clip it in.
Now this is ready to go on the vehicle.
Now install the Ion Series door handle in the reverse method of removal, being conscious of the electrical connectors and the lock and latch rods. Once you have the handle in place, reinstall the 3 8mm bolts on the backside of the handle. If you have passive entry, plug the connector from the handle back in.
So now that we've got our handle installed on the front door, we're gonna move on and repeat all those steps on the rear door.
Grab the top of the window and pull up while depressing the clips as shown. Repeat on the outer window track. Now raise the window all the way up.
And then we're gonna tape it to the frame.
Remove the window switch again. Remove the 2 T20 Torx bolts on the door jamb boot. Now, we can remove these clips on the weather stripping. Pull the boot out and underneath the weather stripping. Take a flathead screwdriver and disengage the clips on the top and bottom of the boot. Then pull the boot out and press down on the tab to pull the connector out. Pull the boot out from around the weather stripping. On the front side of the carrier plate, peel back the service access plug. Now we can disengage the handle rod from the door latch through the access plug we just opened. Unclip the collar from the rod and remove the rod. Now remove the 3 T30 bolts that secure the door latch on the side of the door. Remove the 11 10mm bolts around the edges of the carrier plate. To remove the carrier plate, pop the top retaining clip out and then carefully guide the door latch out from the door. Set the carrier plate aside for now. Use the same steps as the front door to remove and install our Ion Series door handles. Note that the other handles will not have a lock cylinder or additional rod.
Now that we've got both our driver's side handles installed, we can now repeat all the same steps up until this point on the passenger side.
Now take your Ion Series module and plug both your 4-pin and 2-pin harnesses into it.
And then we can get to mounting our module in the driver's side dash. We want to get it as close to the center console as we can. That way we're going to have equal length on all the harnesses running to our handles.
The arrow on screen is locating the general area in which we will be mounting the Ion Series module under the dash.
We're going to be taping the ends of our harnesses to a straightened out piece of metal, and then we're going to bring the harnesses through a grommet on the firewall on the driver's side dash, and we're going to bring them into the engine compartment where we'll be tapping these wires.
Pull all the slack through into the engine bay and remove the harnesses from the straightened out metal piece.
The first wires we're going to be tapping to are going to be the headlights, so there's a few components we're going to have to remove to make those accessible. So we're going to have to remove this top trim cover here just behind the grille. It's held in with 14 of these push pin style trim clips, so we're gonna get to removing those. The last two are on the back side of the cover here. Remove the cover.
Locate this electrical connector on the air box and disconnect it. Now disconnect the electrical connector to the left of it. Lower down on the air box, go ahead and remove this harness. Back on top, loosen the hose clamp and slide the air tubing off the air box. Next, we'll need to remove the air inlet duct. Remove the 2 bolts located on both sides of the duct. Slide it out of place on the left side of the duct. Go ahead and remove the air inlet duct from the vehicle. With the air inlet out of the way, we can finish up removing the air box. Pull the air box upwards, removing it from the rubber grommets holding it into place. Now we will locate our headlamp connector on the driver's side.
Now we're gonna unplug the headlight connector.
There are 3 different types of headlights that fall into 2 categories that make your wiring different. LED and halogen reflector headlights are base style headlights and use a 12-pin connector. However, LED projector headlights are a premium headlight and use a 16-pin connector. We will show the procedure for base style headlights first.
With the tab facing up and looking at it from the back side, we're gonna be tapping to pin 5, which is gonna be 5 over from the left. So this pin right here. We're gonna place a T-tap on pin 5 here. If you need to cut back a little bit of the harness tape to add the T-tap, you can do that at this time. Go ahead and place our T-tap around like that. If needed, you can use a pair of pliers to crimp it down till it clicks. Now we're gonna grab our red wire with blue tracer from the 4-pin harness on the Ion Series module, and we're just gonna measure it up to where the headlight connector plugs in and cut it to length. Then we can strip the end. Now we're gonna crimp on a single disconnect. Then we can plug that into our previously placed T-tap. Then we can plug our connector back into the headlight.
Now we will go over the tapping process on a premium style headlight.
Now this is a 16-pin connector. So when looking at it from the back side, it is gonna be the pin 5 over from the left. So that's gonna be this wire right here.
Cut back the harness tape if you need more space to place a T-tap.
Now that we've got the wire we need, we're gonna grab a T-tap and place a T-tap on that wire in pin 5.
Clamp the T-tap down.
Now we're gonna grab the red wire with blue tracer from the 4-pin harness plugged into the Ion Series module. We're gonna measure the wire up roughly to where the connector plugs into the headlight, and then we can cut it and strip the end. Now crimp on a single disconnect, then we can plug the disconnect into our T-tap that was placed on pin 5. Then we can plug our connector back into the headlight. We're gonna grab the red wire with green tracer, and we're gonna bring that over to our passenger side headlight, and we're gonna do the same on the passenger side.
If you option for running light, we will work with the orange wire from the 4-pin harness. If you did not option for running light, cut the wire from the harness and move on to the next section. We will be tapping at the underhood fuse box. Open the fuse box.
Now we're gonna be working with fuse 79, which is this fuse right here. So we're gonna remove the fuse first, then we're gonna grab the fuse tap included in our kit, and then we're gonna take the fuse we just removed and install it in this open bottom slot, and then we can install the fuse tap into the slot that we removed the fuse from. Now we're gonna come back to our orange wire and cut it to length with that fuse tap and strip the end. Now we're gonna crimp it onto the butt connector end of our fuse tap.
Close the fuse box.
Now we're gonna be working with our solid red wire from the 2-pin harness on our Ion Series module. We're gonna measure this up to length with the battery positive post, and then we're gonna cut it and strip the end. Now we're gonna grab our included inline fuse and crimp the butt connector side onto our stripped red wire. Now we're gonna shrink the heat shrink. Now we're gonna crimp a ring terminal onto the other end of our inline fuse.
Install the ring terminal onto the battery positive terminal.
Lastly, we're going to be working with this black wire on our 2-pin harness from our Ion Series module. This is going to go to our battery ground, so we're going to measure that up to our negative terminal on our battery. Then we can cut it, strip it. Now we can crimp on a ring terminal.
Set the black wire aside for now until we reconnect the negative terminal at the end of the installation.
Now just be sure to tie up any loose wires you have in the engine compartment, making sure to keep them away from any heat or moving components.
Now we can begin reinstalling our airbox. Lower the airbox into place and push down so it fits back into the rubber grommets that hold it in place. Reattach the air tubing to the airbox. Then tighten up the hose clamp. Reinstall the harness at the bottom of the airbox. Near the top of the airbox, reconnect the 2 electrical connectors.
Now we can resecure our air duct. We'll latch that onto the air box.
Then install the 2 bolts to secure it.
Now we can put our top trim cover back on. So we'll feed it into place, and then these little ends latch into underneath the fender right there like that. Now we can start replacing our push pin retainers.
Make sure to reinstall all the push pin retainers on the front side as well as the 2 on the back side.
So now we're going to move on to routing our handle harnesses from the Ion Series module to the handles themselves. So first we're going to pop this kick plate and sill plate up. We're going to peel back some of the weather stripping around the edge of it. Now I'm going to grab behind the kick panel and just pull it to the rear, and that'll pop out like so. Just behind the kick panel we just removed, there's this rubber plate as well as this push pin fastener.
Remove the push pin to reveal the area we will be using to pass our harness through the cab. Now partially remove the rear sill plate as shown. Peel back the weather stripping on both sides of the B-pillar trim. Now pull the B-pillar trim back from the top of the panel and then remove it from under the rear sill plate to completely remove it. At your Ion Series module, take 2 harnesses from your kit and plug them into the left-hand front and left-hand rear connectors.
Now we can begin routing these to the door handles.
Now take a straightened out piece of metal and fish it through the hole in the cab at the driver's side front door. It should pop out near the rubber cover in the driver's footwell. Take your left-hand front harness and tape it to the straightened out metal piece.
Now we can pull it through. Make sure we loop the harness around the back side of this weather stripping here. And then we can pull all our slack through.
Now prop up the carrier plate assembly near the door for wiring.
Now we're going to prepare our door jamb boot. We're going to remove this tape on the back side of the boot.
Pop the tabs off the top of the boot to release this plastic cover.
There's a little plastic piece on the back side that we'll have to pass our wires underneath once we get it through the boot. As for passing the wires through the boot, we're going to take our straighten out metal piece and fish it through this center opening here. We can begin pushing through the boot. Once the wires are out from the back side of the boot, we're going to pass it under that little plastic piece on the cover. Then we can proceed with pulling a good bit of our slack through the boot. Once we got our wires through the boot, we're going to fish it through this access plug on the carrier plate. We can untape them from the straightened out metal piece. Set the harness aside for now.
We will be placing adhesive clips in the indicated areas on the inside of the door. Clean the surface before you install the adhesive clips.
The first clip we're going to place is going to be about here on the back side of this surface, and we want to get it about level with the rear of this support bracket here. Then we're going to move over to placing some clips on this part of the outer door frame here, leading the harness up to the connector on our handle.
Route the wires through the clips and click them closed.
Now that we've got our harness up to the connector on the handle, we can strip the ends of all the wires on our harness. Now we're going to grab the extension harness included in our kit, and we're going to crimp on each individual wire to their respective wires on the harness. Now we can shrink the heat shrink.
Add some dielectric grease to the connector on the harness and then plug it into the handle connector. Pull some of the slack on the harness back through the door to ensure there is no loose wires within the door.
Now we're going to place 1 or 2 last adhesive clips to secure this extra slack.
If you have passive entry, make sure to bring the passive entry harness through the access port with the Ion series harness. Take the carrier plate and place it back into the door, making sure to line up the latch. Resecure the top dowel into place.
On the outside of the door here, first we're going to resecure our T30 screws. Now we're going to resecure all of our 10mm bolts on the front of the plate. Now we can reassemble this cover on the back side of the door jamb boot, and we can clip these ends back into place. Now we're going to fish it underneath that weather stripping there.
Now reconnect the electrical connectors into the door jamb boot. Feed the door jamb boot connector back into the hole in the cab and engage the clips.
Now we can add some tape back around the other side of our door jamb boot here.
Reinstall the 2 bolts we removed earlier on the door jamb boot assembly. Reclip the weather stripping.
Now we're going to reconnect our lock rod as well as our latch rod. We're going to begin clipping our window back into our carrier plate. Before we do that, just make sure that we have no leftover slack inside of the door here. So just make sure to pull all your slack through this access plug. And now we can start undoing the tape from our window. Just be gentle and take it down slowly. And continue to push the window down until the clips on the window engage the plastic retainer on the window track.
Make sure the clips engage on both sides. Latch the Ion series door handle and passive entry harness into this slot.
Then we can resecure our plug. Now we can refasten our mirror harness into place. Now we're going to plug the connectors from our mirror harness back into the door module.
Reconnect this connector as well if you have it.
If your truck has passive entry, plug the passive entry harness back in. Now all this extra slack that we have on our handle harness,
Fold this harness up and find a suitable place to secure it on the carrier plate. This is what our harness looks like secured.
now that we got our front door assembled here, we're gonna grab our left-hand rear harness and we're gonna start routing that towards the rear door.
Route the harness under the carpet along the factory harness towards the B pillar.
Continue bringing our harness towards our B pillar here.
Keep the harness clear of the seatbelt retractor.
Now we're gonna bring our harness through the hole in the B pillar.
Tie it to the factory harness leading up the B pillar.
Once you get the harness through the hole in the B pillar, don't forget to bring it around this weather stripping here. Now we can grab our carrier plate here and we're gonna prop it up near the door here.
First, remove the tape on the door jamb boot.
With our tape removed, we can unlatch these little clips at the top here and we can pull it off. Now we're gonna be running our wires through the connector body here in either one of these openings. But to make that easier, we're gonna take the boot off the connector and then we're gonna tape our harness to a straightened out piece of metal. Now we're gonna take our straightened out metal piece and go through the connector body like that. Bring some of the slack through and then we'll start going through the boot. Once we've got it through the boot like that, we can pull some of our slack up and then just set the boot aside for now. Now we're gonna take our harness and run it through that inspection cover that we had to cut out earlier. Then we can untape the harness from our straightened out metal piece.
We are going to place adhesive clips to route the harness in the door in the same manner as we did the front door harness. The spots shown are where we will be placing our clips. Make sure to clean the surface prior to placing the adhesive clips.
Now we can strip the ends of all our wires.
Now crimp on the harness.
Now we can shrink the heat shrink.
Add some dielectric grease to the connector on the harness and then plug it into the handle connector.
Now we're gonna pull some slack back through out of the door. Now we're gonna place one last adhesive clip. Now we can begin reinstalling our carrier plate, lift it back up and pull all our slack through out of our door. And then we're gonna take our latch and feed that in first. Then we'll line up our dowel at the top and push the plate in. We're gonna reinstall our 3 T30 Torx bolts. Now we're gonna reinstall our 10mm bolts around the carrier plate. Now we're gonna get on to refastening our door jamb boot. First, we're gonna fasten the boot back to the connector body here. Now we're gonna feed the connector back through this weather stripping and towards the hole in the cab. We can kind of pull our slack through as we're doing that. Once we get to the connector, we can plug that back in. Now we can plug the whole assembly back into the hole in the cab. Now we're gonna fasten this plastic cover back onto the back side of the boot here. And we can add some tape back on there. Now we're gonna fasten this end back into place. And then we can reinstall our T20 Torx bolts. Now we're just gonna clip the weather stripping back in. Now we're gonna reconnect that latch rod. Now we're gonna take our access plug and just reinstall that. All right, now we're gonna begin dropping our window back down and reconnecting it to the tracks. So we're just gonna carefully remove our tape while holding the window. Once we got our tape off, we can slowly start dropping it back down. Just go slow and bring it straight down. Now bring the window all the way down till it clips into the plastic retainer on the track. Make sure it clips in on both sides. Now we can take our little service port that we had to cut out earlier, and we're just gonna close it up and put some tape over it. Now we can proceed with tying up any extra slack we have on our handle harness.
Now we will move on to passing the passenger side harnesses over to the passenger side. First, plug in 2 harnesses to the right-hand front and rear slot on the Ion Series module. Mark one harness with tape so you can differentiate the front from the rear. We will have to remove the blower motor cover on the passenger side. Remove the 3 push pins and then disconnect the electrical connector on the back side of the cover. Now back on the driver's side, we will tape both of the harnesses to a straightened out metal piece and send it over to the passenger side. You can now continue fishing the harness over until you can grab it from the passenger side and pull it through.
Okay guys, once we got both our right-hand side harnesses over to the passenger side, we're gonna go ahead and repeat all the same steps that we did on the driver's side.
Back on the driver front door, we will begin reassembling the door panel. Begin by plugging back in the speaker.
And we can refasten our 5mm screws. Now we're gonna reinstall our door panel, so we can start by plugging in the electrical connectors that we have present. So these 2 smaller connectors here, we're gonna bring through the opening for the handle bezel. And then we're gonna grab our window switch connector and bring that through where the switch will be mounted. Now we're gonna bring the panel up and guide our lock rod through the hole in the panel. Make sure to engage the latches on the bottom, and then we can push down. Now we're gonna put our little clips back in around the edge of the door panel. Now we can fasten our T20 screws back into those little clips. Now we're gonna plug in our switch panel connectors. Now we're gonna latch the front of the switch panel in here first, then we can push it down. Now we're gonna take our inner handle bezel here, and we're gonna plug in our connectors on the back side of this bezel. You can feed the handle through. And we can put our Phillips head screw back in. Now I'll put our little cover back over that screw. Then we can take the connector for our little tweeter here if you have it and plug that back in, secure the harness, and we'd pop the sail panel back into place.
Now on the rear door, reinstall the speaker in the same manner we did the front. Reinstall the rear door panel in the same manner we did the front door panel. Reinstall the upper trim bezel. Reinstall the blower motor cover.
Now we're going to reinstall our lower B-pillar trim panel, feed it underneath the rear sill plate here. Once we've got the panel back into place, we can start re-engaging our trim clips. Now we can reposition our weather stripping around the trim panel. And we can take our rear sill plate here and just pop it back down. Now we're going to reposition the weather stripping on the front side of the B-pillar. We're going to want to make sure to reseat this little push pin fastener. Now we're going to reinstall our kick plate.
Reposition the weather stripping over the kick panel and then clip the sill plate back into place. Now we're going to connect the negative terminal on our battery.
So we're going to remove this nut here on the negative terminal, and we're just going to pop our ring terminal on that stud there and then re-thread on our nut.
Reconnect your auxiliary battery if you have one.
Alright guys, that is going to conclude it for this install. As you can see, these handles look absolutely phenomenal and they tie in super well with our other products. If you guys want to pick yourself up a set of these handles or some of our other products such as the M2 running boards you see here, or mirror lights, or even cab lights, head on over to boostauto.com. That's it for now. We will catch you guys in the next one. The products shown in this video and so much more can be purchased on our website at boostauto.com. We're proud to offer a wide variety of products, parts, and accessories for your truck or SUV that will take your build to the next level. To watch videos like this one and to find out about our newest innovative products for your vehicle, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's all for now. We'll catch you in the next one.